Ilira, hello. Thank you very much for joining us here at the iNetworker channel. I'm very happy to see you. And I'm very curious to know about many cultural backgrounds you have.
Thank you for having me here.
The first question I would have is about your origins. So you are coming from Albania, but grew up in Greece. To me, Albania is a completely terra incognita. I've never been there. I don't know anything about the culture, though I met some people from Albania. So how is this culture different from the Greek culture, and which difficulties did you experience there, if any? So, or was it very natural to you?
First of all, I have to say I was born in Albania in 1986. This is 4 or 5 years before the collapse of the communist regime. And this regime lasted for almost 50 years, which means that the country was isolated. In this whole period, it was literally a completely, fully isolated country with no open borders to no country whatsoever. And this is also part of the reason why you don't know much about Albania and why it's an uncharted territory. It's a mountainous area with a lot of sea around it at the same time. So the south, where I come from, is very diverse in comparison to the north. The food, the accent, the dialects that we have. So this is something that fascinates me about Albania, the fact that it's such a diverse country.
I would interrupt you here, so because to me, so sorry to say that, so but it seems to me that Greece is not too welcoming culture to other nations, and that's why. So it is my question. So how do you feel there, growing there, and so on?
I moved in the age of 11 to Greece, which is another country with a completely different destiny in the last 50 years in comparison to Albania, in comparison to all these countries that went into the communist regimes and experienced this kind of isolation. Greece did not have that, thankfully. And at the same time, we happen to be border countries, so we definitely share a great amount of similarities. We have more or less the same food, we sing the same songs, and we mourn our dead people in the same way. But as every neighbor country, we also have our share of conflicts. And this makes the experience of being an Albanian in Greece a lot more challenging than being, say, a British person in Greece. So Albanians were the biggest migration population in Greece. In 1991, there was an exodus. We even call it like that. Like when Albania opened its borders, people thought that the borders will be open just for a night. So a great amount of people just stormed out in order to go and reach the West, not knowing what they would find there. But the need to escape and to see the world and not to be isolated anymore was so great that they just went. They literally left with whatever they had in hand and went to another country, and one of the neighbor countries was Greece. In Greece, I was raised up being told consistently that I'm different, that I come from a country that is not exactly welcome there. You were naturally being excluded from so many fields of society. So my story is not different than the story of a migrant growing up in Germany. But every country has its own particularities, and every nation has its own other. So we, us Albanians, happen to be the favorite other in Greece, meaning we were the unlucky ones. We were the largest migrant population. Being a child of an immigrant family made me realize since a very early age that I'm different, that I need to learn about diversity. I need to articulate diversity. I need to cope with it in a way in order to have the same chances and opportunities in life. But at the same time, it comes with this inner existential crisis because you're 11, 12, 15, and you want to be exactly the same as everybody else in your environment. You want to be a youngster who doesn't care about diversity but cares about the boy or the girl they're going to fall in love with, cares about school and about exams and about friendship and about vacation next summer. And all of a sudden you are 15 or 16 and you have real existential questions in your mind. Who am I in this society that doesn't accept me? If I say that I'm Greek, they will put a question mark on it. I say my name and immediately it raises question marks because it's not a classic Greek name. So the moment that I introduce myself, the question comes, who are you from? And I would say I'm from Athens. That's where I was from. And then it comes with a question mark. Really, from Athens? Just like Maria or Christine or Katerina, are you sure? So there is this suspicion. And then you're like, okay, maybe I'm not from Athens. At some point you start internalizing all these question marks and you are forced to out yourself. To say, yes, well, I was born in Albania and I came here when I was 11, even though that doesn't mean anything at that particular moment when they ask me where I'm from.
Can you say that you completely integrated into the Greek culture?
So, as I said, I went to Greece in the age of 11, so that means that I learned the language perfectly. I didn't have an accent. That makes quite a big difference. You couldn't tell from my looks that I was born elsewhere. Albanians and Greeks look very much the same. I went to school, I studied, I went to university, I did my master's. So this would be the package of a very well-integrated person. Even though I really, in my personal or even professional life, I would never use the term integration because it already points out certain status levels that you're supposed to reach. Yes, I reached those levels. So in that sense, I was the perfect example of integration for the ones who are very worried about integration. But at the same time, I think that integration doesn't mean anything in a society which hasn't learned how to deal with differences. Because despite me being perfectly integrated, I got a degree to become a teacher. And all of a sudden, the day that I finished my degree, I found out it's only for Greek citizens. No one had informed me before.
Really?
So you finish a very demanding 5 years degree. And all of a sudden they tell you, yeah, but it's not for you, actually. It's just for the ones who have a passport. So what does integration mean in the moment where in the eyes of bureaucracy, in the eyes of institutions, you have less opportunities? Or at the same time, I do become a teacher after a very long battle, and the school director tells me, how about you don't tell the parents of the students that you are actually Albanian? So again, you ask yourself, all right, I ticked the integration points. Nevertheless, there seems to be another counterpartner on this integration process who doesn't seem to have learned much. But I can do as much as I want. If the other part, which is usually the majority society, hasn't ticked the same boxes of learning to coexist with me, then my effort is actually pointless. I don't even want to imagine what it means to be a person of color in Greece, a person who doesn't have documents, a person who is practically invisible. And the same thing goes for many people being raised up in Germany, especially in the first decades of migration, because I think this is also a matter of societies learning how to deal with migration, with multiculturalism, and they do get better. Usually, you see that the generation of today faces different struggles, but probably not the same struggles as their parents 30, 40 years ago, and that's good.
I would also have a question. So to live in such different cultures, so it's Albanian culture, Greek culture, so now German, so we have such thing as a German culture, so we will be coming back to that question a little bit further. So, but is it a benefit for a person or rather an additional burden, too many obstacles, hurdles, and so on and so forth? So what do you think?
This is such an important question, and it gets raised quite a lot. I mean, living in between different cultures is never one thing, and my answer would never be one thing. It really depends how I woke up today. It really depends who I met on the street, what kind of experiences I made today. I absolutely think that being multicultural is a great gift, the opportunity to have access to so many different languages, so many different lifestyles, so many different countries with all the great richness that every country brings, while at the same time, it can be quite a burden if your culture or what you bring with you isn't valued by the place where you live. Sometimes you just want to be completely invisible and no one asking you about your background and no one really making it into such a big deal. Because I have the impression that when people ask you about your background, it's not only because they are so curious about you, but it comes very often with their desire to tick their boxes they have for you, and in order for them to put you in the box that they think you fit. If, for example, being an Albanian or being a Greek in the German society would come with a lot of stereotypes and stigma, it doesn't matter how proud Greek or Albanian I am. Because all of a sudden I become the symbol of something that maybe I don't even want to identify with. Multiculturalism comes with its own share of beauty and its own share of drama. It's so fascinating that we always ask people with migration story how they feel about their multiculturalism. Mm-hmm. But we don't ask people without that story how they feel about living in this kind of society. Mm. And this means that we kind of have made multiculturalism as a task for the multicultural people. It should be a task for everybody to raise a question to themselves of how they exist in a society that grows in diversity, that changes every day. We don't need to raise the question just to the ones who are daily affected by this. You know, I read this very interesting study which was made in the University of Potsdam, where monocultural kids were asked to talk about culture. So let's say biographical German kids were asked to talk about culture. A great majority of them, they said, I don't have a culture. Why? Because they have never reflected about culture. It's not something that occupies their thoughts. It's not something, but do they have a culture? Absolutely. Every person is a set of understanding of the world. So I think that we need to raise awareness about culture and diversity and so on in all different parts of society to make everybody aware of the fact that one has a story, and that this story sometimes doesn't only have one channel and it's not part of one spring, but of several different springs and so on.
Thank you very much for this inspiring description of different cultures, and you're also talking about multiculturalism. But what I wanted to ask you is that in one of your interviews, you also said that it is interesting to observe. So when young people from Israel are coming to Germany and they're expecting to have a very stereotypic German culture, so they're ready to experience it, and suddenly they see that there is no such a thing as a German culture per se, and the same goes for Germans who are coming to Israel. So does it mean that there is no such a culture as a German or Israeli or Albanian or Greek culture, so that we have been already part of multiculturalism or even transculturalism? Mm-hmm. So because it's another approach. So what should you say?
I think that stereotypes are much more stubborn and much more established and persistent than the speed of change between countries. So sometimes I observe that stereotypes that we use about a certain country are not valid anymore. They were created, 70 years ago, 50 years ago, but they are still so persistent and so deeply rooted in the society that we carry them in every generation. And these labels, for some reason, have an immense power of rooting. Mm-hmm. Labels last for too long. We have an expression in Albanian and in Greek where we say it's better that you lose one eye than your good reputation. Because if you lose your good reputation, it takes so much time to repair it. So I have the impression that when we visit a country we know nothing about, automatically we refer to these old pictures that are usually kind of mostly negative or mostly comic about the other country or dehumanizing the other country. I don't know, there are different stereotypes. Sometimes they are based on certain historic phenomena, but at the same time, our societies change so massively and so quickly that when you go to a country and you visit it, you see that it's not only that thing which the stereotype refers to. In the case of Germany and Israel, which I have been lucky to experience in this specific frame in the youth exchange, it's always fascinating to see, especially because of the trauma of the past. I mean, the German-Israeli relationships are not easy relationships. They are based on a lot of trauma, and they are based also on a lot of madness of people, actually madness and desire to rebuild on the trauma. So they have also a lot of strength and optimism in it per se. This is something that fascinates me between these two countries. So, but the stereotypes are mostly referred to negative attitudes, and all of a sudden when you go and visit the other country and you find out that it's so much more than you thought, it's always quite a relaxing experience to make. Now, if we talk about diversity, people are often not informed about what the other country is. So, for instance, Israel is a country of migration. Immigrants from all over the world, literally every corner of the world, went and settled there and created a new state. And this is not something that is in the mind of every German student, for example. So when you go there and you meet all this fascinating country, which comes with so many different food cultures, languages, origins, and so on, that's quite a great shock. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, you are prepared to meet the Israeli culture, but you can't find it anywhere. Of course, there is something connecting. It's what creates healthy ties in a society. There is something that pretty much everybody identifies with, but it's not one thing that you can put it in one sentence.
If there is no pure German culture or pure Israeli culture, what would you say about the business culture in different countries? For example, is there such a pattern as a German business culture or Israeli business culture, Albanian, Greek business culture? So
certainly every society comes with its own set of codes and work ethic and so on, and depending on the place where you work, you also get exposed to different work ethics. So I can say that in general in Germany, I have often observed this sense of commitment, which is something that I like very much. Committed to this idea that you will also fulfill it. And this is something that creates trust relationships. And if you see, for instance, people coming from Balkan countries, Albanians, Greeks, they are very much out of the box thinkers. They are motivated and they bring a sense of inspiration. This is the experience that I have made. Of course, this is super general and doesn't apply to every person, but what I find totally fascinating is to kind of get all these best qualities and integrate them and make them a part of yourself, because we are so flexible and so adaptable that I think we can learn from each other. And this is what successful companies, successful societies, they are made of this capability of integrating interesting elements from the work culture of the other and making it your own, also in order to honor the other, also in order to show them that their presence is valuable for this company, for this group, this society, and so on. And this is where good things happen. This is where interesting things start to happen, when we value the work ethic of each other.
This is a very good bridge to my last question. You have been dealing with so many people of so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures, and I think you need a very good networking effort for that. So what are your networking secrets? So in reaching out to each and everybody and to talking to each and everybody, so what are your secrets?
I don't think I have too many secrets, but I do have a lot of curiosity, and that is something that I personally bring, and it has helped me in a way to kind of create access in different groups of people, communities, languages, and so on. And this comes also with some effort in the sense that coming in contact to very many different communities is not always an easy task. I mean, you need to have a certain openness and you need to have a certain curiosity level. And that has helped me personally. And at the same time, Berlin makes it kind of easy for me because there are so many people here living and doing similar things to what I've been doing and bringing so many different backgrounds, which always fascinates me. So I think it's a combination of lack of inner curiosity and also of what I mentioned before, this kind of desire for adaptability and for integrating different interesting elements from other people. So I don't intend just to do networking in the sense of getting to know and meet everybody, but also taking something from them and honoring their background or their language or their personality and whatever every person brings. I think networking is a perfect example of giving and taking, you know. So I'm very glad to be in a city which is such a great beehive for all these opportunities. So for me, networking in Berlin is actually it's a fun thing to do. In a way, I raise the question to myself, why not?
Thank you very much for this interview and for this inspiration so you gave to me and also to our listeners.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.